Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Oscar Reeves. I'm 28 years old. And 3 minutes ago, I was the best logistics supervisor at Dalton Freight Solutions. Now I'm jobless. And heartbroken. But not in the way you might think. "You're fired," Vincent Dalton told me, his voice ice-cold and steady as he leaned back in his pristine office chair, that smug smile crawling across his face like he was savoring every second. "Stay away from my daughter. You're not good enough for her." I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, jaw clenched, feeling the air thin around me. 6 years. 6 damn years of pouring myself into this company. I came straight out of trade school and started on the loading docks. Worked double shifts. Never called out. I cleaned up every operational mess they threw at me. By 26, I was the youngest night shift supervisor Dalton Freight had ever had. And this is how it ends? Because I dared to fall in love with his daughter, Natalie? Vincent Dalton wasn't just my boss. He was Natalie's father. The CEO. A self-made logistics mogul who played golf with senators and preached about family values during corporate retreats. Everyone bowed when he entered a room. Except me. And apparently that was the problem. "I understand, sir," I finally said, keeping my voice level. But inside I was breaking. Not because I was scared, because I was angry. Because I was humiliated. Because he thought he could strip me of everything with a snap of his fingers. But mostly because he thought Natalie was some pawn he could move around to protect his image. What he didn't know, what he would soon regret, is that Natalie had already told me everything. The private vendor accounts. The manipulated inventory logs. The hush money payoffs. The fake insurance claims. Vincent Dalton wasn't a moral crusader. He was a fraud. A criminal hiding behind a perfectly tailored suit and $1 million smile. And Natalie had the proof. That morning started like any other. I showed up before sunrise, walked the floor, checked on overnight shipments, and nodded to every single crew member who respected me more than any man in a corner office ever would. Then I got the call. "Oscar, Mr. Dalton wants to see you." Now. I knew something was off. No small talk. No usual updates. Just a short message delivered with averted eyes. When I entered his office, Natalie wasn't there. That hurt more than the firing. Because the night before we were sitting on her porch drinking tea, laughing, holding each other, whispering plans for the future like two people foolish enough to believe love could outrun legacy. But that future shattered in 4 words: "You're fired. Leave now." I didn't say goodbye. I didn't ask why. Because I already knew. Vincent Dalton saw me as a threat, not just to his ego but to his empire. And as I was escorted out by 2 security guards like a criminal, my head held high but my heart pounding, I realized this wasn't just a breakup. This was war. Natalie was waiting in the parking lot, tears streaming down her face, clutching a worn manila folder to her chest like it was a lifeline. "I didn't know he'd move this fast," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Oscar." I shook my head and pulled her into my arms. "You didn't do anything wrong." "You did." "I brought it," she said, handing me the folder. "Everything I've been collecting. I backed it all up too. On 3 drives. This is just the start." Inside were dozens of photocopies, payment invoices with mismatched totals, spreadsheets showing damaged shipments that were never logged at the docks, false insurance reimbursements from 2 major carriers. All with Vincent's digital signature. "I don't want this to destroy him," she said softly. "But he destroyed you. And if he gets away with it, what's the point of doing the right thing?" I stared at the building. Cold, gray, imposing. My whole life had been in there just hours ago. He thought this was over. That kicking me out would keep everything buried. He was wrong. Vincent Dalton had just handed me the shovel. And I was going to dig up every secret he ever tried to hide. When you dedicate 6 years of your life to a company, sacrificing weekends, holidays, and sleep, you think at the very least you've earned some dignity. I was wrong. By the end of the day, not only had I been fired, I was branded a thief. Natalie called me just after lunch, her voice trembling. "Oscar, my dad's spinning a story. He told HR you were caught skimming inventory. That you manipulated shipment records to hide it." I sat there in my apartment, half-packed boxes from the job I no longer had, manila envelopes still untouched beside me, and just stared into the wall. Felt like my lungs stopped working. He wasn't just trying to erase me from the company. He was trying to destroy my reputation. And it was working. I got a call from one of the warehouse supervisors that night, Benji. We weren't best friends, but we respected each other. "Hey man, I don't know what's going on, he said, hesitating. They pulled me into HR today. Asked if you'd ever acted suspicious with inventory. Said there was an anonymous tip about you. I laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. Anonymous? That's rich. They're saying you manipulated logs. But I checked them myself. They were solid. And now they're gone, he said. They wiped the entries and locked the system. Oscar, what the hell is going on? I didn't answer. Because the truth was uglier than either of us imagined. I called 3 of my old contacts from Dalton's main office. People who'd praised my work in quarterly reviews, sent me friendly emails during holiday breaks. People who knew me. Every single one of them turned cold. Sorry, Oscar, we can't get involved. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, but I don't want to jeopardize my position. Best to let HR handle it, okay? HR. You mean the department that reports directly to Vincent Dalton? The man had prepped for this. Before firing me, he made sure to poison every well I might drink from. Every safety net. Every former ally. And still, the worst part? It wasn't being fired. It wasn't being lied about. It was watching Natalie break. 3 days after I lost everything, we met at a rundown diner just outside the city. The kind of place nobody from her father's world would ever step into. She looked tired. Not just physically, soul tired. He told the board you were investigating him out of jealousy, she whispered. Said you wanted to expose him, to keep me for yourself. I almost choked on my coffee. He's turning me into some desperate lunatic? Natalie nodded. And they believe him. They're launching an internal audit. But it's just theater. He's covering his tracks, Oscar. Fast. She slid over a flash drive. I made copies. Everything I could find. His vendor files. Email chains. Spreadsheets showing the rerouted invoices. And she paused. 3 personnel files. Employees he got fired over the last 2 years. Every one of them raised a concern before getting accused of theft. I stared at her. Like me? She nodded. I felt my hands curl into fists. Rage rising from my gut like a wildfire I couldn't control. He's been doing this for years, she whispered. And no one's ever stopped him. That night, I lay awake in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above my bed like a slow, useless clock. I lost my job. My reputation. And if Vincent Dalton had his way, I'd lose Natalie too. Because I was the guy from the loading docks. The one with calloused hands and a name no one recognized. And he was the king. A man who built an empire on secrets, manipulation, and charm. Who would believe me? My thoughts spiraled in the dark. What if this was too big for me? What if I fought back and lost everything? But then I remembered something Natalie had told me the night we first kissed. My dad's good at getting what he wants, she'd said, but he always underestimates people who fight with heart. And I realized, maybe I didn't have his money, or his name, but I had something far more dangerous. I had nothing left to lose. There's a difference between catching someone in a lie, and realizing the entire foundation of their world is a lie. I thought I was dealing with a greedy CEO. A man willing to protect his pride and crush me to preserve his legacy. But what Natalie and I discovered next, it wasn't just fraud. It was a web of lies that stretched across cities, years, and victims we never even knew existed. It started with a folder buried deep in Vincent Dalton's personal network files. Something Natalie had pulled while he was away on a business trip and she still had access to the accounting system. The folder was titled, Vendor Relations, 2020 to 2025. But when she opened it, it wasn't vendors. It was names. Employees. Each with a short description. Warehouse lead. Asked about truck logs. Logistics analyst. Inquired about PO mismatch. Shipping clerk. Complained about phantom inventory. Every name on that list had something in common. They were fired. Blacklisted. Labeled security risks. Just like me. He's been doing this for years, Natalie whispered. Anyone who gets too close to the truth, he makes them disappear. It wasn't just Dalton Freight. With some help from a friend of mine who still worked in data compliance, we traced Vincent's past positions, executive stints at 3 other logistics firms across the Midwest. Every single company had quietly let him go after internal issues. But there were no lawsuits. No headlines. Just golden parachutes and NDAs. Because the man didn't just steal from companies, he stole clean exits. And he covered his tracks by turning others into scapegoats. He's got an entire strategy, I said, flipping through one of the printouts. Create ghost vendors, file inflated insurance claims on non-existent damage, and sell the undamaged goods through shell companies. He's laundered at least $1 million, Natalie said. And used people like me to take the fall. She nodded. You're the third person he's fired for theft, in just 2 years. All warehouse supervisors. All fired right before audits. I felt sick. I wasn't just a casualty of pride. I was a pawn in a criminal operation, and not even the first one. But the final straw came in the form of an email chain Natalie discovered between Vincent and a man named Warren Tills, regional insurance rep for ProSure Claims, one of Dalton Freight's biggest liability providers. The messages were casual. Cold. Like two men discussing lunch plans. But what they actually revealed was damning. Warren was helping Vincent file false damage reports in exchange for kickbacks. We had PDF copies of claims submitted under fake cargo loss, tied to real policy numbers, but for shipments that never even existed. They split the money down the middle. It was all there, percentages, account numbers, even discussion of the next set of dummy freight. I knew he was corrupt, I said slowly, but this is racketeering. Natalie turned pale. This isn't just about you or me anymore, she said. And she was right. This was a federal crime. We were no longer dealing with a vindictive father. We were dealing with a criminal enterprise. But Vincent wasn't done. The next day, Natalie got a call from HR, officially informing her that she was being transferred to the Cincinnati branch. It was presented as a promotion, but we both knew what it was. Exile. He knew she was close to the truth, and he wanted her gone before she could dig any deeper. That night, I told her the part of my plan I'd kept to myself until now. I have a cousin, I said. Trevor. He works in financial crimes for the FBI. She blinked. You never told me that. I didn't think I'd ever need to. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. And you think he'll help? If we show him what we found? He won't have a choice. There was a long pause. Then Natalie said something that broke my heart and lit a fire in my chest all at once. If we do this, she said, my dad will never forgive me. I looked her in the eye. If we don't, he'll do it again. To someone else. To someone worse off than us. Someone who can't fight back. Her hands trembled as she reached for mine. Then let's burn it all down. When someone strips you of everything, your job, your dignity, your future, the only thing you have left is the truth. And we were going to use the truth like a weapon. Natalie and I didn't have power, money, or influence. But we had evidence. And a hell of a lot of motivation. My cousin Trevor called me back 2 hours after I sent over the first round of documents. Jesus, Oscar. This isn't just internal theft. This is systemic fraud, insurance conspiracy, and money laundering. Do you realize what you've got? Yeah, I said. I lived it. I need more, he said. Originals, timestamps, financial trails. If this goes federal, and it will, we need to walk in airtight. Natalie was already way ahead. She'd backed up everything, emails, manifests, vendor records, onto a pair of encrypted flash drives. But she'd also printed physical copies. Because we didn't trust the cloud anymore. Hell, we barely trusted phones. Vincent had too many eyes. We met Trevor at a rest stop outside of Chicago, 2 hours from Detroit. Neutral ground. He wore jeans and a North Face hoodie, but he carried himself like a man who knew where the bodies were buried. I've seen schemes like this before, he said, flipping through the binder. But never with this level of internal access. Your boss isn't just crooked, he's meticulous. Natalie leaned forward. He's also arrogant. He thinks no one will ever challenge him. Especially not his own daughter. Trevor nodded. Then he's about to get the surprise of his life. We spent the next 72 hours building the case. Trevor connected us with a federal prosecutor named Monica Dale in Detroit's white-collar crime division. Monica didn't waste time with pleasantries. She was sharp, calculated, and dead serious. Within 20 minutes of reviewing the documents, she said one word that sent chills down my spine. RICO. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. She wasn't just talking about prosecuting Vincent Dalton as an embezzler. She was talking about taking down his entire operation. Every shell company, every crooked insurance agent, every fake vendor. But we needed to move quickly. Because the moment Vincent suspected an investigation, he'd vanish. And we'd already found a booked flight on his calendar, Tuesday. Private charter to the Cayman Islands. He wasn't planning to stick around. Natalie and I agreed, we had to make our move Sunday night. He always left his home office unattended on weekends. His housekeeper was off, and his security system, according to Natalie, was more for show than substance. She still had the code. It's your father's house, I said. You don't have to do this. I do, she whispered. Because this is how I get free. That Sunday night, under cover of darkness, we slipped into the Dalton estate. It was eerie. I'd been there before but never like this. Never as an intruder. The house was too clean. Too quiet. It felt like walking into the lair of a predator who had already gone hunting. Natalie led me to his office. Everything was locked. But she knew the password, her childhood birthday. Even his passcode was built on lies. Once inside we worked fast. We copied the contents of 3 external drives, took photos of every ledger, every invoice folder, every sketchy post-it note taped inside his desk drawers. But the most valuable find came from his locked filing cabinet. A legal pad. Old school. Handwritten. Pages of calculations. Insurance claim numbers. Wire transfer amounts. And names. Lots of names. One of them made me stop cold. R. Torres, fired 2022, theft, suspected. He knew. I remembered Raul Torres. He was the man I replaced as night shift supervisor. He'd been let go for violating chain of custody. No one talked about it after. Now I knew why. He framed Raul, I said. And probably dozens more, Natalie added. We'd uncovered not just a crime, but a pattern. And the authorities were going to see all of it. The next morning we handed everything to Monica Dale. She sat in silence for a long time, flipping through the documents with clinical precision. Then she looked up. We're raiding the building tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp. His home too. What about his flight? Natalie asked. We've already grounded it. A smile tugged at my lips for the first time in days. That night I stood outside my window staring at the city skyline. For the first time in weeks I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. Because we weren't just going to expose Vincent Dalton. We were going to make sure he couldn't do this to anyone else again. He thought he could rewrite the truth. But he forgot one thing. The truth doesn't disappear. It waits. And when it rises, it burns everything down. When you've lost everything, revenge isn't just about payback. It's about reclaiming your name. At 7:52 a.m. sharp, I stood across the street from Dalton Freight Solutions. Natalie was next to me, gripping my hand so tight it hurt. But I didn't pull away. Across the parking lot, agents in navy windbreakers lined up behind tinted SUVs. No sirens. No theatrics. Just precision. This was a federal takedown, not a warning. At 8:01 they moved. 3 teams. One to his office, one to his home, and one to ProSure's regional headquarters. Warren Tills, the crooked insurance agent, was going down too. Inside the Dalton building, it took less than 90 seconds for chaos to erupt. Employees streamed out the front doors, phones in hand, mouths open in shock. Nobody knew what was happening, only that federal agents were inside and someone important was being handcuffed. That someone was Vincent Dalton. I watched as they walked him out in a crisp suit, wrists bound, head low. For a split second, his eyes met mine. And I saw it. Recognition. Then rage. He knew I'd done this. He just didn't know how. Vincent Dalton, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, insurance fraud, and money laundering, one of the agents said loud enough for the press to hear. Yes, press. Monica Dale had tipped off a few trusted reporters. She knew this story needed public eyes, so Dalton couldn't spin it like he always did. Natalie's hand trembled in mine. He's still my father, she whispered. I know, I said. But she didn't let go. That afternoon the feds uncovered everything. Every shell company. Every ghost invoice. Every payoff and falsified claim. The man had built a house of cards and told the world it was a fortress. But we'd pulled one card, and the whole empire collapsed. Later that night Monica called. We've confirmed at least 9 employees he fired under false pretenses. Most were supervisors or analysts who raised concerns. Will their records be cleared? I asked. They'll be contacted. Some may even have grounds to sue. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. This wasn't just justice for me. It was justice for every name he tried to erase. Meanwhile, Warren Tills had flipped. The insurance agent sang like a canary. He gave the feds everything: emails, call logs, payment records. He even admitted to falsifying inspection reports for 3 other clients, though Vincent was the biggest fish. And the one who dragged him down. By week's end, news anchors were calling it the Dalton Freight Fraud Scandal. Local stations. Business blogs. Even national coverage. For once, the whole world saw the truth. The powerful man in the corner office was just a common thief. But the victory didn't feel like I thought it would. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Because no matter how satisfying the takedown, it didn't erase the damage he'd done. The lies. The fear. The sleepless nights wondering if I'd ever work again. I still had to rebuild. We both did. The next morning, I got a call from a logistics firm in Chicago. They'd heard about the case. Read my name in an article. We're impressed, the woman said. It takes guts to go against someone like Dalton. We could use a man like you. I smiled for the first time in days. Not because I needed validation, but because I knew I'd earned it. Not through obedience, but through truth. Natalie started working with a nonprofit that helps whistleblowers come forward safely. She said she wanted to make sure no one else had to choose between family and integrity again. She chose right, the nonprofit's director told me. She's exactly who we need. She is. Even after everything her father did, she walked into the fire to stop him. And that makes her braver than most people I've ever met. Vincent Dalton sits in a federal holding cell now, facing 15 to 20 years. No luxury office. No tailored suits. No applause from boardrooms. Just time and silence. And maybe, if he has the courage, a moment to reflect on the people he tried to crush. Just when I thought the storm had passed, the real twist hit. 3 weeks after Vincent Dalton's arrest, I received a call from Monica Dale. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. My chest tightened. "What is it?" "We found something." I drove straight to the federal building. Natalie met me outside, her face pale, anxious. Monica met us in her office with a sealed envelope and a digital tablet. "What you're about to see wasn't on Dalton's work computer. It was buried on a private drive we seized from a lockbox at his lake house," she explained. She tapped the screen. A folder labeled, "Contingency, Natalie." Natalie inhaled sharply. Monica opened it. Inside were surveillance photos. Dozens of them. Us at the diner. Me leaving Natalie's apartment. Her accessing computers late at night. Even shots of us sitting in my truck the day I got fired. Each one time-stamped. And then, there were emails. Draft. Never sent. To board members. To PR agencies. To lawyers. Each laying the groundwork to frame Natalie if things went south. My daughter's behavior has become erratic. She's romantically entangled with a former employee who has a known grudge. She accessed confidential files without authorization. She may be compromised. My stomach dropped. He was going to pin it all on her. If the feds got too close, he would have burned her to the ground and made it look like she was the real mastermind. Natalie was shaking. He was going to destroy me. His own daughter. Monica nodded grimly. It's not uncommon with men like him. The ego. The desperation. They'd rather lose everything than admit their blood turned against them. My blood boiled. The arrest wasn't the end. It was just a chapter in a longer, uglier book. But now, we had more than just financial crimes. We had intent. And we had premeditation. "This changes things," Monica said. "We're adding charges, attempted obstruction of justice, tampering, and conspiracy." I looked at Natalie. And I saw the war she was fighting internally. He was her father. He raised her. Walked her to school. Danced with her in the kitchen. And he would have watched her burn if it meant saving himself. Back at her apartment, Natalie sat in silence for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and began writing. A blog post. A letter. A confession. Call it whatever you want, but it was raw and it was real. She titled it, "My Father Taught Me Right from Wrong." Then I had to use it against him. She posted it publicly. Not for attention. Not for sympathy. But to own her truth before someone else tried to weaponize it. It went viral within hours. Thousands of shares. Hundreds of comments. Other whistleblowers. Daughters. Sons. Workers. People who had been betrayed by the ones they trusted most. It sparked something none of us expected. A movement. The next morning, the federal prosecutor called again. After Natalie's letter, we've received anonymous tips from 2 other companies he used to work for. Apparently, you weren't his first. Pause. And now, you won't be his last. They say the closer you are to someone, the easier it is for them to stab you in the back. But sometimes, the ones we love most teach us exactly how to fight back when they try. Vincent Dalton had built his empire on fear, silence, and manipulation. But it would all come crashing down because of one person he never thought would rise against him. His daughter. They say the courtroom is where justice is served. But for me, it started long before the trial. On the day I was fired, humiliated, and treated like a criminal by the man whose lies I could never unsee. Now I stood in the back row of a federal courtroom, tie straight, jaw set, Natalie by my side. Her hand gripped mine, steady this time, Not with fear but with purpose. On the stand, Vincent Dalton. Deflated. Wearing a county-issued suit, no designer threads, no power posture. Just a man stripped down to what he really was. A fraud. The trial lasted 9 days. 9 brutal public days where prosecutors laid bare the entire web: false vendors, insurance kickbacks, stolen shipments, laundered money, blacklisted employees, and even the plot to frame Natalie when things went south. Every time her name came up, I felt her flinch. But she didn't break. She never looked away. Then came the victims. Raul Torres. Fired and unable to find work for 2 years. Labeled a thief. Jasmine Ng. A compliance officer who questioned one too many shipments, and was laid off, due to restructuring. Even Benji, my old supervisor, testified. Said he always knew something was off but never had proof. Until now. Vincent's defense tried to spin it. Said he was pressured to hit aggressive growth targets. That he delegated financial oversight, and trusted the wrong people. Then came the twist none of us expected. He blamed Natalie. She accessed records without authorization. I believe she and Oscar conspired to create false evidence, he said, his voice hoarse. The courtroom went silent. Natalie blinked once. Then smiled. Because we knew what came next. The FBI had already verified her data trail, her backup logs, timestamps, digital forensics. Everything she collected was authenticated. She had done it by the book. Vincent's last defense collapsed like everything else he'd built. The judge was stern but not emotional. His words were exact. Vincent Dalton, you're sentenced to 17 years in federal prison without parole for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, and racketeering. Your crimes were not a lapse in judgment. They were the systematic exploitation of trust, for profit. He banged the gavel once. Done. 17 years. No empire. No legacy. No escape. Outside, reporters swarmed. Microphones pointed. Cameras flashing. Miss Dalton, do you have anything to say about your father's conviction? Natalie didn't hesitate. My father taught me to speak the truth, she said into the camera. And when he stopped living by it, I did what he couldn't. I stood up. Even when it hurt. No theatrics. Just truth. In the weeks that followed, things shifted. Dalton Freight's board issued public apologies to the employees who had been wrongfully terminated. Some were offered reinstatement. Others, like me, had already moved on. I accepted the position in Chicago, head of logistics development at a company that believed in transparency. Natalie's letter continued to ripple across the internet. Whistleblowers, employees, even CEOs reached out to her nonprofit for guidance. She was becoming a voice for something bigger than her pain. She visited her father once in prison. When she came back, she didn't speak for a while. Then quietly she said, "He still doesn't think he did anything wrong." I didn't push her for more. Some wounds never close. But we don't have to bleed forever. 3 months later, I was asked to speak on a podcast about corporate ethics. When they asked me what drove me to fight back, I said, because silence would have made me like him. And I'd rather be broke with truth than rich with rot. Now, every time I walk into my office, I remember who I was. The guy with dirt on his hands, dismissed without a second glance. But I also remember what I became. The man who helped tear down a criminal empire, with nothing but love, loyalty, and truth. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.